So you look at the fact, just in the Trump administration, 8% we took on $8 trillion worth of debt. That's an insane amount of money.
Right.
So you take that with all of this out of control spending,
Right.
they forgot the value of a dollar.
Hi, I'm Michael Graham with New Hampshire Journal. Welcome to Diner Table Economics at the iconic Airport Diner in Manchester. Well, to me, you're always Governor Nikki Haley because I'm a South Carolinian, and so you are our governor. It is great to talk to you about the economy here at the legendary Airport Diner.
It's great to be here. This is an awesome place.
I have to tell you, so one of the things we do is we get people to give us questions for you before you come. What would you ask any presidential candidate? And as you approach the table, what's astonished me is the number of people who are already talking about the economy when we walk up and approach them. You've been on the campaign trail in New Hampshire, Iowa, South Carolina in particular. What do you think is the state of the economy right now?
Well, first of all, it's the number one issue, no matter where we go, whether it's Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, or any place in the country. The economy is what everyone is talking about. And Joe Biden and Kamala Harris can say it's great all day long. No one feels that. Every family knows when they go to the grocery store, it's a lot more expensive. When they go to the gas station, it's hard to afford filling up their gas. But it's not just that. You feel it in your mortgage rates, your automobile rates, your insurance costs. Everything that we need to survive costs more. It costs at least $7,400 more per family this year than before Biden took office. So it's a problem.
So one of the reasons we wanted to sit down and have these more extended conversations is that we heard from voters and our readers, they all say inflation, inflation, but it's never what are you going to do about it? Oh, hi Deb, come on over. This is Deb, she's going to be taking care of us.
Deb, how are you? Thanks for helping us out.
Yes, of course. Coffee, orange juice.
Can I get a black tea?
Of course.
Coffee, please. Excellent. I actually drink black tea, but it's too much trouble, so I get coffee here.
Didn't sound like trouble when I
No,
said
it's Deb. Well, she'll take care of you. Deb doesn't like me. It's a long story. I don't want to get into it. But again and again, it's, okay, everyone says inflation. They get up on stage, the debate, inflation. What are you going to actually do? So you're president tomorrow. What does Nikki Haley do to actually do something about inflation?
Well, first of all, wouldn't it be nice to have an accountant in the White House? That's the first thing I'll say. You know, if we're going to talk about it, then let's talk about how to fix it. The first thing we should do is acknowledge the fact that Biden didn't do this to us. Our Republicans did this to us too. The out-of-control spending that we have seen over the past few years is abusive. It's abusive to the American taxpayer, and what I can tell you is, you know, they're spending on everything without any value for a taxpayer dollar. And we saw that when they passed that $2.2 trillion COVID stimulus bill. They expanded welfare. We now have 100 million Americans on Medicaid, 42 million Americans on food stamps. That's a third of our country. Then you go and look at the fact that Republicans opened up earmarks and pet projects for the first time. In the 2024 appropriations budget, Republicans put in $7.4 billion worth of pet projects and earmarks. Democrats put in $2.8 billion. So you tell me who the big spenders are. So how do we fix it? The first thing we should do is claw back the $500 billion of unspent COVID dollars that are out there. Instead of 87,000 IRS agents going after middle America, let's go after the hundreds of billions of dollars of COVID fraud, one out of every $7. If 8% of our budget is interest, quit borrowing. Cut up the credit cards. Everyday families have to balance their budget. I had to balance a budget as governor. Why is Congress the only group that refuses to balance a budget? So we'll cut the spending, we'll stop the borrowing, we'll eliminate the earmarks, and I'll veto any spending bill that doesn't take us back to pre-COVID levels. That will save us trillions. The next thing is we need to focus on the middle class. You're seeing the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. I'm going to eliminate the federal gas and diesel tax so that we give American families more space. We're going to cut taxes on the middle class and simplify those brackets. That'll flush cash to be more in the pockets of middle class Americans. That'll stimulate the economy. And then we're going to make the small business tax cuts permanent. They made the corporate tax cuts permanent, but they made the small business tax cuts temporary. And finally, when I was governor, and it's been this way forever, presidents meet with their governors once a year. I'm going to meet with governors, Republican and Democrat, once a quarter with the sole purpose of taking as many federal programs as we can and moving them down to the state level. So think healthcare, welfare, education. It will shrink the size of the federal government and it will empower the people on the ground. When we do that, you really are going to hit it hard at reducing costs stopping this debt that's out of control, but also empowering people to have the value of a tax dollar again. And I think that's really important.
Okay, so while you make your tea, I'm going to ask my follow-ups here. So one of the reasons economists say that we have an inflation problem right now is because you have too many dollars chasing too few goods. And if you have tax cuts, then you're unleashing more dollars to chase goods. So wouldn't cutting taxes at a time of inflation actually promote inflation? And once again, I don't have a degree in accounting from Clemson University, so that means I can count without taking my shoes off. I'm kidding, I love Clemson. But that's a question that people are asking us is how do you reconcile tax cuts with the demand problem that seems to be feeding inflation?
So the first thing is acknowledge the fact that, look, Russia, China, and Iran never wanted us to be energy independent.
Right.
We need to be energy dominant. Why? We are blessed with resources. Let's use it to build our economy.
Right.
Let's pull the EPA back. Let's speed up permitting. Let's export as much liquefied natural gas as we can. Let's have biofuels, biodiesel. Let's do all of that. That not only makes sure that American families can afford their utility bills, but we can actually export it out. That will build up our economy. The second thing is everybody always wants to say you can't cut taxes, you'll kill the economy. It's the total opposite. When you cut taxes, you put more money in the economy. People start spending again. We saw that with the tax cuts in the Trump administration. What happened? As soon as they did that, it was like everybody started spending. The economy started flourishing. You saw more employment happen than ever before. It's a misnomer to say that. People say that to be risk averse. It's the exact opposite.
So let me follow up then. So what then do you think is the cause of inflation? Why did we go through the peaking at 9%, which I can't imagine. I mean, 9% inflation sounded like crazy to me, and then it happens. Why do you think it happened if it wasn't demand?
I mean, look at under Obama, Trump, and Biden, government grew by 40%. So you look at the fact, just in the Trump administration, 8% we took on $8 trillion worth of debt. That's an insane amount of money.
Right.
So you take that with all of this out of control spending, they forgot the value of a dollar. And then you add Biden's stimulus cash that went in there. It started under Trump. Biden has continued it. You flushed all this cash. You started having people sit on the couch and take checks. They stopped working. You stopped the permitting of pipelines, and the cost of everything went up. And you add on that, the Fed did a great disservice to America. They were slow to move. They were too political. They didn't tell Biden, you don't flush the government with all of this cash. And so everybody's paying the price for the fact that our past presidents put us in a hole. Biden has increased that roller coaster, and the Fed didn't act responsibly in the process.
I'm so glad you brought up the Fed, because that's another thing. New Hampshire has a lot of, live free or die, small government conservatives, very upset by the concept. We have the audit the Fed crowd is very big here, et cetera. So as a president, what do you think is the natural role for the political guys and gals at one end of the street, and then the Fed, who in theory is supposed to be neutral? Like, that's why they exist. That's why you don't have Congress set. By the way, can you imagine if Congress set interest rates? That's just terrifying. Exactly.
God help us.
So as president, what would you see? Would you be a lean on them? Would you be hands off? What kind of Fed person would you want to running?
First thing is, what's the role of the Fed? To protect the strength of the dollar.
Okay.
Period. So when you look at that, their job is not to go do anything but protect the strength of the dollar. So if the Fed had done their job, they would have gone to Trump and Biden and said, you can't flush the system with this much cash, or we're going to pay the price. They didn't do it. They caved to the presidents, and they didn't do their job. And Trump and Biden didn't let them do their job. So all of us suffered because politics was at play, and that's the problem we have in government. There's too many politics in every agency we have, and there's too much manipulation by presidents and by Congress and all those bureaucrats in the agencies. It's got to stop. The protection is always supposed to be on the taxpayer. And so if you lose the strength of the dollar, what happens? That's our national security at risk. Because that's what keeps us as a superpower. I mean, China and Russia, they're salivating at the fact. And if we don't get this under control, we're going to look like Japan.
Do you think there's a real danger that the dollar stops being the global currency the last stop currency?
The way you know that is in a couple of years, our interest expense will be higher than our defense budget. That's a scary rate. And when you start dealing with that, I mean, we're already borrowing money just to make our interest
Right.
payments. China owns some of that debt. So they want our dollar to continue to weaken. The problem is America has to wake up. And that means we've got to call out Congress for the spending that they're doing. We've got to prioritize spending because it's not that we don't have it, it's how they choose to spend it. We need to start acting like we can just keep printing this money. And look, if we treated DC like every household treats it, where you don't spend more than you
Right.
make, we'd be in a totally different
Well,
place.
but one of the things you hear from, once again, these are from voters, because New Hampshire voters follow this stuff so closely. They go, look, we love the idea of balanced budget. We like, of course, we do it in New Hampshire every 2 years. It just is not realistic. You're 33 trillion in the hole. You've got entitlements programs that are on auto, pay. How realistic is it to get to zero new debt? That's just politics talking. That's not economics.
So the first thing I will do when I become president is exactly what I did as governor, because the tone at the top matters.
Right.
The first thing I did as governor, I replaced the head of every agency, whether they were doing a good job
Sure.
or not. I wanted to freshen it up.
Exactly.
The second thing is I sent a team into every agency to clean it up. Pull down old regs, pull down bureaucracy, get rid of problem children, get them mission focused again. Then I went and gave them 90-day benchmarks. They had to start showing taxpayers a return on their investment. It got all of the stuff that wasn't the role of that agency out and got them focused on, are you doing what the taxpayer wants you to do? So we put the heads of agencies, people who knew the challenges of their constituents. And then we went and focused on the fact that every agency was spending because they were worried they wouldn't get the same amount of money next year if they didn't spend it all. So we put all the spending online for every taxpayer to see. And then we incentivized those agencies to give money back to the taxpayers. And magic happened.
Right.
When we did all of that, all of a sudden that set the tone for my legislature. That will set the tone for Congress. That look, if we've got agencies doing this, now it's your turn.
But you know what I mean? Like if you take, one, salt shaker off the table of the, State Department diner table, they're going to scream, "Oh, cuts! You're cutting! Children are starving. You're pushing Granny off the cliff." What about the interest groups? What are you going to do when the people who are really interested in keeping that government money flowing and their friends in the press start attacking you for being the evil villain?
Same thing happened in South Carolina. I mean, I was the evil villain, but guess what? We paid down our debt. We filled our coffers. We grew our economy. It all comes down to communicating. You have to tell taxpayers the truth.
Right.
Tell them how bad it is, and tell them what your vision is of fixing it, and tell them it's going to hurt. But it's going to hurt not in the way that they're going to feel it in their households.
Right.
They're actually going to feel some relief. It's going to hurt members of Congress
Right.
who are used to having the power fiefdoms. It's going to hurt the bureaucracy
Right.
who's used to having anything they want whenever they want. We will get hard on government.
Right.
Taxpayers aren't going to feel it. Government's going to feel it because guess what? They all have their power fiefdoms that they want to protect. There will be a new day in DC when I walk in that door because when you put an accountant in there, I will communicate to everybody where the wasteful spending is going. We don't need the port projects.
Right.
We don't need to be sitting there spending on all these ideology programs that are happening. We can move these programs from the federal government down to the states and eliminate a lot of those jobs and a lot of that space. Do you know right now, 75% of federal workers are working from home?
75%?
75%. Do you know 70% of office space, agency office space, is sitting empty right now? Taxpayers are paying
Right.
for that. These are the things we are going to call out. There is a lot there, so don't let them tell you there's no place to cut. There are plenty of places to cut. They just don't want to cut it. That's what we're going to do. There'll be a new sheriff in town when I get there.
This episode of Dining Table Economics is brought to you by the Competitiveness Coalition, a first-of-its-kind group that champions pro-consumer policies to foster innovation and create growth. Chaired by New Hampshire resident and former Ambassador Scott Brown and featuring Drew Klein of the Josiah Bartlett Center for Public Policy, the Competitiveness Coalition is pushing back against the excessive overreach of the Biden administration, especially Federal Trade Commission Chair Lena Khan. The coalition believes that politicians and unelected bureaucrats should not punish entrepreneurs or discourage future innovation with unfair regulations or discriminatory taxes. After all, breaking up a successful American business only helps China and our other foreign competitors. The Competitiveness Coalition is a natural fit with the Live Free or Die state, and we are happy to have their support. Please find out more at competitivenesscoalition.com. So you've mentioned politics several times and economics, and we had someone here at the airport diner ask, what can we do to get government to work for the economy as a whole as opposed to specific groups of specific interests? And that brings to mind to me things like, for example, the CHIPS Act, which is, here's an industry, we're going to give this industry lots of taxpayer money, we are going to support them. Are those the kinds of things that you as president would support?
Terrible, terrible. I totally spoke up against the CHIPS Act. It was another thing that rose inflation. But think about what the CHIPS Act did. So in this name of national security,
right,
they said we need to make sure we're independent when it comes to the chips. So let's make sure we're manufacturing them in America. Good concept, right? We do want to build more things in America. We do want to make sure that that happens. But they flushed all these companies with money and said, come manufacture in America. But you know what they didn't do? They didn't make them stop manufacturing in China.
Right.
When is that a national security issue? So now you just gave them free money to make more money in China and America. You just kicked yourself in the gut.
Right.
It's common sense. You can't do things like that. That's the problem that we have. I've never believed in corporate subsidies.
Okay.
I've fought them every step of the way. That's not the way you fuel the economy. The way you fuel the economy is get government out of the way. Let companies breathe. When companies have cash flow, they don't go on vacation, they hire more people. Protect small businesses. That's the heartbeat of our economy. And make sure government, the regulations and the bureaucracy gets out of the way and let businesses flourish and partner with them. Don't demonize businesses, partner with them.
So I supported the CHIPS Act until I found out it didn't involve nachos, and then I totally changed my position on it.
Smart man.
But it is odd to me to see this money up front, deliverables after. I thought Operation Warp Speed was a different model, which is we don't care how you make us the vaccine, you make it, make sure it works, we need it, and then we'll pay this premium so that incentivizes. Did you think Operation Warp Speed was the right way to do the vaccine?
There was a lot that didn't go well during COVID. I mean, first of all, one of the things I'm going to do.
But do you see the different model? I mean, the model on, I'll give you the money up front, and then it's the wimpy, I'll get the hamburger on Tuesday for the $1 today.
You never
I'm like,
do that.
bring me the hamburger, then I'll give you the $1.
Like, do you ever give a kid a sucker and say behave?
No, of
you
course
never
not.
do that.
No.
Because guess
Well,
what?
I never
They're
give a
gonna
kid a
run off
sucker
with-
because I keep it myself, but that's a separate.
But the kid's going to then take the sucker and run off and misbehave.
Exactly.
So, the first thing is when you lay benchmarks, you have to make sure that it's good for the taxpayer. I'll say that over and over again. You have to look at the end goal. What happened with Operation Warp Speed and the stimulus package under the Trump administration was they threw all this money out there and said, make them, make them, make them. Now, one, it showed that our pharmaceutical companies can get to work faster, and when government allows them to breathe, things can happen. The bad thing is you had all of these vaccines that they were sending them off to other countries trying to get rid of them. But not only that, you took people's rights away in the process, right? And then you said, oh, we have all these vaccines, make people get it. Everything about that was wrong.
Right.
Instead, what you want to do is, yes, partner with your pharmaceutical industry, but don't partner in a way that you make them rich and then mandate people to have something happen.
Right.
It was the wrong way to do it. And you incentivize them before they even did anything. You never do that. And so I think it's a whole government mindset that has to change. If it doesn't protect the taxpayer, you shouldn't be doing it.
So the Competitiveness Coalition did a poll here in New Hampshire. 75% said these big businesses that we do business all the time, like Amazon, leave them alone. We're fine. We don't want you breaking them up or whatever. But it's part of this new antitrust view, which is when I was a kid, in college, it was if the people collude and my prices go up, we have to break them up because the market has been broken. Now it's your prices are great. In fact, sometimes it's free, and we're still going to break them up because they're just too big. What's your take on that premise? For example, as an accountant graduate, what is antitrust, like when should antitrust be invoked in your opinion, and should it be invoked simply because a company is large?
It's the whole atmosphere of politics at play. The number one job when you look at antitrust is the consumer protected?
Right.
It's all about the consumer. So if there is an unfair situation with the consumer, you address it. Right now, you look at the Amazons, you look at all of these, what do? They make it efficient, they make it effective, and the consumer wants it. So because a politician doesn't like it, because someone else doesn't like the business they're doing, if it's good for the consumer, it's a good thing. If it's bad for the consumer, that's when you get involved. And that's why I'm saying they're now playing politics over who they like and who they don't like. We have to clean every one of these agencies up because politics doesn't belong in any of them. You can have politics in Congress. You can't have politics in our agencies. That's exactly the one way that'll get the country down into a hole, and that's what's happened.
So I told my producer that I was going to ask a question you were going to hate, and I think you're going to hate this one. I want you to talk about broadly about ideology, dorm room economics as opposed to dinner table. We've had because there's a bunch of different kinds of Republicans now. You have the old school small government libertarian. You have the new national conservatives. They want government involved to protect what they think are key industries, vital interests. They have no problem with ethanol subsidies and things like that because they think it's a smart way to go. You've got super libertarians who want to see shut down the Fed and have nothing. Where in the dorm room, as people are talking about economics, is Nikki Haley?
I think if you look at when I became governor, I was very much a Tea Party candidate. So I felt like, it was back when it was taxed enough already.
Right.
Government was intended to secure the rights and freedoms of the people. It was never meant to be all things to all people.
Right.
And so I look at it from that lens. Don't look to government to fix things. Government usually breaks more than it fixes.
Right.
So I am a very limited government person. I don't think you go and give corporate subsidies. I don't think you go and play favorites. I don't think you pick winners and losers. I think you protect the taxpayer and the taxpayer's dollars. When it comes to corporate subsidies, you mentioned like the ethanol and all of that. The thing is, I don't oppose the ethanol. I oppose the subsidies.
Right.
But you can't take it away from ethanol if you're not going to take it away from the oil guys.
Right.
So you have to keep it fair. That's the issue that you've got there. So either take it away from all of them,
Right.
or you leave
Right.
it like it is. But the bottom line is never pick winners and losers. That's when you start to lose the game, and always focus on where's the best place for those
Right.
taxpayer dollars to go, and guess where the best place is? In their pocket.
But the national conservatives would argue that philosophy led to the hollowing out of manufacturing in the U.S. because you just said, hey, let everybody compete, don't pick winners and losers. And then China ended up making itself the winner because they subsidize, because they promote businesses, because they use their money to pull jobs offshore. What would your response be to someone who had that concern?
Well, what helped China was when America helped them get into the World Trade Organization, which was a huge mistake, right? So, look, there are a lot of countries that subsidize, but there are a lot of those countries that go down that socialism creep. That's not what we want to do.
Okay.
We want to let them innovate, get out of their way, supply them with skilled workers,
Right.
which is the biggest thing that these manufacturers need. Look, when I became governor of South Carolina, we had put all our eggs in the textile basket. And when the textiles went overseas,
Yep.
we had 11% unemployment. By the time I left, we were building planes with Boeing, more BMWs than any place in the world. We brought in Mercedes-Benz, we brought in Volvo, 5 international tire companies. We were the beast of the Southeast. We were #1 in foreign direct investment. Why? Because we made sure that we had no unions, no regs. We made sure that we had skilled workers so that they had people to hire, and they were able to do what they wanted to do.
Right.
That's the key, is allow businesses to function without government intrusion. Allow people to have opportunities to get those jobs and supply the training that allows them to do it. That's the way you win. You don't have to pay things off to make things happen. You have to actually incentivize them through the environment that you give them so that magic happens.
By the way, any chance that I have here to promote the Bubba Motorworks model in South Carolina was absolutely great. When they're making, people didn't believe me. No, we're making BMWs in South Carolina.
Yeah.
And they were like, what, do they come with 8-track players? Hey, leave us alone. We're making the BMWs. That was
#1 BMW
it was absolutely amazing.
manufacturer in the world.
And the question you'll get in New Hampshire is, where do you find people to fill those jobs? The employment stretch, the lack of workers, particularly here in New Hampshire, which already had low unemployment. Now it's problematic. It's people begging for workers. What, if any, is the federal role in addressing that, and what would you do to help these business people who are saying, I could make more money for everyone, I could pay more taxes, I can't find bodies to come in and do the job?
So, when all of our South Carolinians could make textiles, they didn't know how to build a car. They didn't know how to build a plane.
Sure.
What we did is we partnered with our technical schools. And whenever we would recruit a company, I would send the training managers to that country, and I would say, learn the way they
Right,
manufacture, learn their culture, and then come back. And what I would tell those manufacturing companies is all I ask is 2 things. One, when you come to South Carolina, you hire my small businesses to do your overhead stuff.
Sure.
And you give my South Carolinians a chance. We went and trained South Carolinians, and the companies could interview them. They hired 97% of our workers. We partnered our training centers with our people. We taught them the skills. We made sure we shifted the skills. That's what our community colleges are supposed to do. That's what our training centers are supposed to do. So when you see those federal programs go down to the states, guess what? In South Carolina, we'll teach you how to build a car. In New Hampshire, you might be teaching something else. In Iowa, they'll be teaching you how to farm and do agricultural tech. You customize it based on that, but you make sure the people in the state get those jobs, not bringing people from out of state. Let them, so you re-skill people. We have to do that all over this country.
And what's fascinating is New Hampshire has a very high college-educated rate population. There's not a big tech school. Once again, I grew up in South Carolina, and everybody was like tech schools. Everyone was very promoted. People were like, "This is a great gig. I'm going to work on whatever, refrigerators or motors." Is there a problem in America of people looking down on the jobs in the what would used to be called the blue-collar sector? You might call it today the hands-on sector, the tech sector. Is that part of the problem?
And one of the things we had to focus on in South Carolina is to get parents off the idea of you have to go to college.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, what happens? You go to college, you build up all this debt, and then you're wondering how to find a job. So what we did is, one, the technical schools were a big answer to that, but we had to partner with our guidance counselors and take them to these manufacturing places and show how clean they were, how worker friendly they were, how these were amazing jobs. We also did, and this is why I want vocational classes back in our high schools. We did apprenticeships all over South Carolina. We taught our kids how to build the things we were making. And so they got invested in our economy before they ever finished high school, before they ever finished college. So we pulled them in before that happened. That's what we need to make sure that we're doing, because these jobs are fantastic jobs. They pay well, they've got great benefits. And you just announced in New Hampshire, New Balance is building a new manufacturing hub. This manufacturing, it's all kinds of manufacturing. But when you build things in America, it's great. When I was governor, we started building the first American-made TVs, the first American-made bicycles. There's so many things we can be doing. Instead of building it in China, let's make it here in America.
We've got time for one more question, and it's the last one we were asked by someone here at the diner.
With the interest rates the way they are right now, and the way I see the slowdown in the housing market, what is it that we are going to do, or you are going to do, to bring the housing market back and to keep us from going into another 2008 recession?
It is really unfortunate. A new statistic came out that the average age of a new home buyer, 49. 49. So when you think about our kids, and I saw my daughter just got married, and I saw how hard it was for her and her husband to buy a home. It is really tough. That's the American dream. We want all our kids to be able to do that. But the problem is, when you look at the cost of, it's not, we talk about, interest rates. The treasury rates that the Fed did, that's what ran up mortgage prices, auto loan prices, all of those things. And so we've got to get our fiscal house in order. So the first thing is, we do have to get these interest rates down, because no one can afford a mortgage at this point. The second thing is supply matters. And why is supply being impeded? Because of regulations. You know that all over New Hampshire, there's a lot of regulations. You've got to look in a way to do it in a smart way. Rent costs are through the roof. People can't afford rent or mortgages. So the first thing is get inflation down, so housing costs come down, interest rates come down, and then focus on the regulations so that supply opens up. That's hugely important. Everybody should know what it means to have the American dream. We have to get that back in our reach. That's another reason why I want to cut taxes on the middle class. We've got to open that up so that they have the cash to be able to do that.
I said last question, I always lie.
I know you just lied.
So when we go to Lizard's Thicket in South Carolina, what do you order?
I like their collard greens.
Oh, they're so good.
Their collard greens are
good.
great. Their biscuits are great.
What about the entree though? What do you do for the meat? Do you do the, I like the smothered steak, I like that. If they have fried fish, but they don't always have it when I go. But that's the thing I miss about up here, the fried freshwater fish. Like we used to catch brim in the Big PD River and take them to my grandma's house, and she would make them right on the spot, just fried with a little bit of cornmeal. They were so good, but They have a different culture up here.
I mean, their
I'm
pork
missing
chops
it.
are really good.
Oh yes, absolutely. Look, if I can talk Lizard's Thicket with Nikki Haley, I've had a good day. Thank you so much for your time. I really
It's been
appreciate
fun.
it.
Thank you.